check out Cajun Lights, your complete dog hunting outfitter. Tracking equipment, leashes, collars, dog supplies, and much, much more. You can find it all at CajunLights.com. And don't forget their outstanding lineup of lights. You can find it all at CajunLights.com. Elite nutrition products are the hottest thing on the market right now for dog and horse owners. And Houndsman XP is a dealer. You can find all their products on our website at houndsmanxp.com. Over the past 5 years, you've tuned into this podcast, and I don't take it lightly. We have built a mutual trust. And when I recommend a product, it's because I believe in it, I use it, and I'm given my seal of approval for that. I'm putting my name on that. And with Elite Nutrition products, I do trust it. I do use it. I've seen great results with their essential dogs, their pre and probiotics, their tick-borne disease treatment. It's all natural. It's a great alternative to pharmaceuticals when used appropriately. If you expect extreme performance, you need Elite Nutrition. Available from houndsmanxp.com.
But Taz, that hack season was fun. And at that point, I knew there were a lot of grouse, and I flew Taz for 8 years, and he caught an awful lot of grouse, and he was a consistent performer, and he's the best grouse hawk I've ever had. And his 8th season, I was up in Kansas flying with a good friend, and it was right before Christmas. I was going to be up there about 3 or 4 days. And they flew him on a perfect evening. It was 20 degrees and just a little light breeze. Like clockwork, 20 grouse went into this milo field. So put him up and off he went. Came over about 700, 800 feet, walked right in, and he came down and just drilled the grouse. Whipped around and hit the ground and garbage on the ground, and the grouse could barely fly, but it started to take off. And Taz took off after him, and I was like, yeah, that's dead. And then all of a sudden, that bird just glided to the ground. And dead right there. I said, the grouse wrong. And that was it.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome back for another episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast. And in this episode, we're continuing on like we have been in Oklahoma, and we are talking to Mark Waller this episode. And Mark's another guy that's been practicing falconry for a very long time before the rules and regs and things like that got put into place. And so it's always great hearing from those guys and hearing what things were like in the earlier days of falconry. And he also talks about managing his falconry around his law practice and lots of other things, and also, contributing back to, the state and national clubs and things like that as well. So got a lot of good stuff in this episode, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it. We're going to jump right in, as always, and here we go. Thanks again, Mark, for helping make this happen, and I appreciate it. And I'm sorry we couldn't do this in person, but I'm glad that we could make this work, and have a chance to talk shop some this morning. So appreciate it.
Sounds good.
All right. So when we were talking a little bit ago, basically we established that you're an attorney. You've been at this. How many years did you say you've been an attorney? I can't remember.
I passed the bar in 1991.
Okay.
So a while.
So you've been at it for a minute then.
Yeah.
So, and you said right now you're down to about 30-hour weeks or so, something like that.
Yeah, on average, probably.
Basically, it's one of the reasons why I always like asking people what they do, and how often they do it and all that kind of stuff, because everybody has to find creative ways to fit all these different things around the lifestyle / hobby, or whatever you want to call it, that we do. But I'm just happy that at least nowadays anyway, you don't seem to have to sacrifice a whole lot of sleep or do like I do and shave however many years off your life, working nights and sacrificing sleep to be able to fit everything in. So I'm happy for you that you're down to just 30 hours and you're able to fit more of the stuff that you like to do outside of of your career. So I mean, that's cool. I'm happy for
Yeah,
you.
it's tough to be a falconer and have a standard 8 to 5, 5 days a week, and I never really wanted to do that. But for some periods as an attorney, I was having to deal with that a bit, but I still managed to fly birds through all that time, and I've um, been fortunate living here because we had lots of game, so I didn't have to spend a whole lot of time looking to fly. Um, so, um, and I didn't start till a little later, so I was pretty much a falconry bum till I was about 31. Um, so yeah, but yeah, it's jobs can get in the way of falconry for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bummer that whole pesky life thing kind of gets in the way of the things that we enjoy sometimes. But I don't feel bad. I was about 30, 31 before I got into this too. So I mean, there's people I know also that have gotten into it even in their like 50s, almost 60s. And well, actually, one guy, I mean, almost either is or almost 70s, just got into it.
Into falconry.
So
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, you start all ages, but some of us started really young and kind of knew it was our thing and never lifted off our foot off the throttle. So
for sure. Once you get sucked in, you either find out real quick that it's not for you, or you can't stop.
Right.
So yeah, I like I said, I mean, I know that as far as my end of things go, it would be hard. It would have been hard to start sooner or later for me. I mean, do you think that you started? Well, obviously you started at the right time because that's when you could start. But do you wish you could have started earlier, or do you think you should have started later, or how do you?
Oh well, I mean, I had my first kestrel when I was 9 years old, and I had parents that were very supportive of that. And I mean, it was one I bought from a guy named Ray Singleton who sold birds out of Florida, and I got it to where it'd fly to me and things, but I didn't really have a mentor and didn't really have much opportunity to try to find a game with it. Um, but really started when we moved from Dallas to Tulsa in 1971, and I was 14. But Oklahoma, Tulsa in particular, was a city that had a whole lot of industrial parks and undeveloped properties in town, and I could walk from my house, my parents' house, basically down the street, around a corner, and I was in a tumbleweed field that had 150 rabbits in it. And back then, northeastern Oklahoma, and all of Oklahoma for that matter, was actually Quail Kingdom. I mean, we had a ton of bobwhites, and so I had game all around me. So I didn't even need to be able to drive to start hawking. And then, and I met some other young falconers that were, I think I was in ninth grade then, but I met some that were just a couple years older than me, and they could drive. So that opened up a lot of possibilities too for looking for trying to find the elusive Cooper's hawk, because back then their DDT had wiped them out in this part of the country. I mean, it was rare to see a Cooper's hawk, but we had so many quail, and like most falconers at that point, we'd all read Webster and Beebe's book, and we thought the Cooper's hawk was like the world's greatest hawk to have, and we couldn't get them, but we looked for them. I mean, nonstop from February through June or so, and we were always hoping we could trap one, but we never could. But anyway, like I said, we had a lot of game, so I got a red tail, and when I had a lot of rabbits to hawk, and so kind of hit the ground running.
I must have misunderstood you then. I thought you said that you didn't. I thought you meant you didn't start falconry until a little bit later. I misunderstood.
No, that was work.
Work, yeah, I got you. Whenever you started talking, I made the connection. I was like, oh, I totally just misunderstood what he said. But no, that's cool. So you were one of the other lucky ones then that I'm envious of that did get the start really early, and for better or for worse, kind of sounded like you got started. So the timeline, then you probably would have started right around or a little bit after then the rules and regs and everything got officially like put in place and stuff then.
Well, it was a little before. I mean, in 71, there really weren't any. Oklahoma actually, to be honest, we didn't really know what the rules were. I mean, most of us were just we just got birds and went with it. And then I think I had a Harris Hawk in 70. Well, in 72, my dad took me and another falconer from here, Jeff Byram. My parents took us up to see Hal Webster. And we met Webster, and Webster was like, "Oh, you need to fly. You need a goshawk. That's what you need." One way or another, I ended up with a Tiercel goshawk, and I flew that for all summer into the early fall. And one of the industrial parks, it caught a bobwhite, landed in a creek that was heavily polluted had a big oil slick all over it, and so he unfortunately didn't make it through that. But then I flew red tails, and I kind of figure where I was going with this, but there were, like I said, there were a bunch of young falconers around, and we got together, and none of us had a license. Ended up trapping a Harris Hawk. I had that, flew that for a while, and while I had that bird, I think that was in 73. Another falconer that you'll be talking to, Rob Huber, who lived on the other side of town, so I hadn't met him before, but when I heard about him, and one way or another, we got hooked up with Jesse Woody, and I don't know if you're familiar with Jesse, but he was a Oklahoma falconer from El Reno. He was a NAFA director. He had a Harris Hawk and a Cooper's Hawk named Tara that he was really proud of. She was a great bird because he caught some jackrabbits with this female Cooper's Hawk. And Woody had been a falconer and, like I said, an active member in NAFA. And Woody also worked for the telephone company. And I'm not sure you're old enough to remember this, but in 1973, we didn't have cell phones and long distance was real expensive. So if you got caught and you're 16 years old or 15 years old, talking long distance to people, you were in trouble. But Woody, working for the phone company, after like 11 o'clock or so, he could call for free. So Woody would call us. And Woody was really the heartbeat of, at that point, of Oklahoma falconry. And he really wanted to start up a club and get everybody involved. And he wanted to make sure we all got licensed and became NAFA members. So we did. Rob Huber and I did, and there were several other falconers around then, like Kevin Leggett, and some other young falconers too, like David Baker and Norman, and a bunch of the guys in Oak City that you'll be talking to. But yeah, we ended up just starting the Oklahoma Falconers Association. Woody was our president. I think Mike Brewer was our vice president. Mike was a really well-known longwinger from Pauls Valley, Oklahoma, that was famous for living in a drive-in theater. And his family owned the drive-in, the Brewer's Drive-In, and they also had a theater in town. And Mike flew a lot of passage peregrines and was a very accomplished longwinger and duck hawker. And so anyway, we had quite a group at the time when we started started OFA, and Woody spearheaded getting our first real regulations. What we had up to that time, before we got, I'd say, really falconry specific regulations, was we could have one of three raptors: Cooper's Hawk, a sharp shin, or a goshawk, unless you had it from another state where it was legally taken. And I don't remember that much about the regulations other than that was it. Those were the birds you could have. And I'm not even sure at that point you had to have a license. But that all ended up part of the first Jesse Woody organized effort at reforming our regulations here.
So yeah, tying back in to the original thought, then it sounds like, yeah, I mean, it was pretty a lot of gray area probably initially, and hence why you guys decided to form the club. And that's interesting that the first few birds that you were allowed to have were all accipiters. That's
Yeah,
yikes.
they were fine letting us have those because that's the one that everybody wanted to shoot. That's
Okay.
how we looked at it. It was like they were, in the '60s. I remember seeing all these photographs in pellet gun magazines where these guys would just shoot hawk after hawk with these pellet guns and hang them up on fences, and most of them were sipters.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, seems like the further you get closer to the Midwest and stuff, it became more like red tails and stuff like that, but I don't know. I mean, I've heard all kinds of. I mean, in all these recordings that I've done, there's been several guys that have talked about, back in the day when there were still legal bounties on
Right.
hawks and things and all that. And around here anyway, I mean, it was definitely more of the bootios as opposed to the accipiters, But anyway, yeah, that's interesting though. I didn't. This will be the first conversation I've had where, talking, to someone, it was like, at least back in those days, it's not something you hear very often, that you're only allowed to start with what's typically considered your harder bird to learn with.
Yeah, it wasn't real well thought out, but that's what we had.
Well, I mean, and like you were saying though, I mean, to a degree, whenever there's not that much in place, and when you're trying to establish some kind of foundation, I mean, there's not really a whole lot that you can really think out yet, because there's not. Whenever you're trying to establish foundation, it's hard to really know what's good, bad, whatever, all that kind of stuff when you're trying to start something from the ground up. So,
But that's where Woody was so helpful, because again, he was a director from NAFA, and I think he was the either central director or director at large. But in any event, he was actively in contact, and particularly with his role or his job at the phone company, because he was on the phone all the time, talking to other directors. And I think Roger Thacker was an NAFA president back then, and I don't know. It was just like I said, Woody got the ball rolling, and Woody had a very good relationship with the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife, and they listened to him, and we got real reasonable early on regulations.
well, that's good, because I think everybody at this point, knows that if you don't have a very good relationship with your state, DNR or whatever, it makes life a lot harder. So it's good that at least someone that was at least someone was in the process, in that whole startup scene, then for you all, that was able to make that a little bit more easy to deal with anyway.
Yes, it went very smoothly.
Good. So as far as the early days of, the club then and everything, I mean, you've already talked about, some of your early beginnings, and, I mean, whenever the club was started and everything around that time, was it mainly just a handful of falconers still, and how many people were kind of struggling at the onset, since those were, was there a lot of, I don't know, I wouldn't say hardship, but being as those were the birds that you were initially allowed to have and everything, I mean, were people having a hard time kind of learning, getting into it, or was there the handful of people involved pretty good with helping each other out?
To be perfectly honest, a whole lot of people that were involved in it at that time weren't even really aware of the regulations.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there were a few people that had, we had red tails nesting everywhere. There were several falconers that had taken IS red tails and flown those on rabbits. And then there were, Woody had some legal Harris hawks, and he let a couple of guys like Oscar Pack fly a big old ugly Harris hawk that he had named Ugly. And then, some other guys that were here. Ken Riddle was obviously a original Oklahoma Falconer, and those guys. Steve Platt, I don't know. Steve had a Prairie Falcon that I think he took legally somewhere. Frank Earhart, he flew some long wings that were legally taken elsewhere prior to 1973. So some of these folks had birds really before I knew them, but there weren't a whole lot of folks flying red tails, and really nobody was flying a Cooper's Hawk or a Goshawk or a Sharpshin hardly, except Woody, and he got his from another state legally. So, things really opened up because in '73 or so, we got our regulations, and that allowed us to take some other raptors. Like, pretty much every state's regs allowed for kestrels and red tails, and we got that stuff in, and some like passage prairie falcons and things like that.
Yeah, because I forgot that you said that you could legally have some of those species as long as you got them from their state and brought them in. I forgot you had said that. Yeah.
I mean, New Mexico, for example, there was a point where there are all sorts of birds available in New Mexico, and you could legally, you could take them from there. Prior to I believe '72, there were a lot of states that just didn't have any. Raptors were treated as vermin, and they could be shot. And you could take them too. That's why you could buy birds from all sorts of birds from Florida. And there was a place up in Grove, Oklahoma, in the northeast part of the state that ended up moving down to Florida, but you could buy all sorts of hawks from there legally.
Yeah, it's amazing how much things have changed.
Yeah,
it's which I guess the only constant is change, I guess, as they say. But yeah, no, so as far as your evolution of things and all that kind of stuff. What has been the species that you've flown the most then over the years since, going all the way back from your early years to, to kind of your current falconry and all that kind of stuff? Since you were able to kind of see this whole transition and going along with everything, with all these different rules, regs, and stuff being put in place, and over time, what became the species that ended up kind of being the go-to for you?
I think I got my first prairie falcon in '75, and I didn't catch a lot of game with it here. I really didn't know where all the ducks were. Caught a couple of pheasants, bobwhite, I think one or two ducks, and I lost that bird. And then I flew goshawks for a couple of years in like '76, '77. Then I flew Passage Merlin for a season, and then after that, since about '78, I've pretty much just flown big long wings. And at first just on ducks, and we knew that we had prairie chickens in Oklahoma, and they were kind of a legendary quarry to chase. People thought they were almost impossible to catch. They'd flown them with tundra peregrines mostly, and these birds would come down and they'd get a bunch of feathers, and prairie chicken would turn on the afterburners, and there's no way that falcon was going to fly them down. And so that was kind of like the holy grail to try to catch. And after flying, I don't know, I flew a passage gyr for 3 years, a passage female gyr, mostly on ducks, but I did catch a few prairie chickens with it. And then I don't know, and I think that was in the early '80s. I think I got the first captive bred bird that Bob Berry ever sold. That was a female Peel's falcon. I flew her for 3 years on ducks and then put her up for breeding. But starting in 1987, I got a female hybrid from Bob Berry, a small one, out of a tundra tiercel into a white female gyr, and I started flying prairie chickens pretty much full time. And I found a lot of places that had them. I was always pretty good at getting permission. If you understand landowners' concerns, they don't want you smoking. They prefer you to not have a dog if you're out there with cattle. A lot of times, if you ask them right up front and tell them you understand what their concerns are, be careful with fences and this and that. I was fortunate. I got permission on a lot of great places. Most of it was ag ground because most of the hawking we were doing on with prairie chickens were in milo fields or soybean fields. So really, since then, um, I kind of worked my way through flying another peregrine that I got from Steve Sherrod for 2 years. But since then, I've flown almost exclusively male deer peregrines on ducks and grouse.
I would like to eventually get into a position where I could try something like that seriously, but I'm never going to around here. So, yeah, we'll see.
Well, a somewhat well-known Indiana falconer named Bob Little, who I've flown with a few times over the years, he just bought him. He had bought himself a little place in northern Nebraska. He moved out there, or would go out and stay in his place sometimes. You probably know a few falconers have kind of done that by trying to find a place that probably not a $400,000 mansion, but you can find some smaller places out there. Some of those states in the Dakotas or Nebraska, Kansas, and that's what he did. But he caught quite a few birds, quite a few grouse with some big falcons he had as well in Nebraska.
Yeah, there's a few states where I think mentally anyway, I think it might be nice to be able to, buy like a plot of land and, scour the Home Depots and Lowe's for a nice big used Maytag, refrigerator box or something that I could just stick on there and, live in occasionally when I go out to these places or something. But we'll see. I mean, I don't know where I'm going to end up eventually, but I mean, it sounds like though that you've had a pretty amazing, when people think of states like Oklahoma, Nebraska, Kansas, they usually think of just the farming and the different aspects of things that may not necessarily appeal to somebody that as a place to like live, because there's not just a whole lot of things that you normally think of as far as just scenery and different attractions to those areas. But I've always heard that those states are kind of the secret, I don't know, kind of utopias for falconry, so to speak. It sounds like you've lived in an area where you've had a lot of great opportunities for that then.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I remember one of the early NAFA meets I went to, talking to these guys from California, and they were like, Oklahoma? I was like, yeah. I said, that's just like all tumbleweeds, right? And I just kind of laughed. And I said, well, actually, northeastern Oklahoma is known as green country. And Oklahoma has more freshwater shoreline than any lower 48 state except Minnesota. So we have a whole ton of lakes in the northeastern part of the state, big lakes. And, there's even a little prairie mixed in around some of that, but most of that's, kind of broken up forest land and pastures. And then the southeast part of the state is pretty much woods and mountains. The Panhandle, of course, is the Panhandle. It's pretty much flat and it's dry and it's where most of the tumbleweeds are. But that's just the far western part of the state. And in the north central part of Oklahoma is the tallgrass prairie, and that's beautiful country. If you appreciate the prairie like we do, and it had grouse and ducks and a lot of quail. So, we have a lot of variety in Oklahoma in the landscape. I mean, it's great squirrel hunting.
Yeah.
If a guy wants to fly squirrels, there's lots of squirrels. Lots of rabbits. We have jackrabbits out west. It was a lot of variety. It's a good place to fly merlins on starlings around feedlots and places. There's, like I said, a lot of variety here.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of states that are like that. It's very easy to have misconceptions about a lot of areas. I know I've been fortunate one of the silver linings for me and all my travels and things from my career and also doing this podcast and stuff, I've gotten to see kind of some of the hidden gem kind of, areas in different states and things like that. And, I've been pleasantly surprised to find that, these kind of misconceptions are just kind of that. I know I've driven through Oklahoma enough to know that there's parts of Oklahoma that I just assume never see again because it's so boring and such a terrible drive. But there's parts in every state that you can say about that, I think. But I've been kind of pleasantly surprised by there being a lot of different states where I've been like, I might actually be able to consider entertaining being around here, or something. But I mean, I know that they say West is best for falconry in general, and I definitely wholeheartedly agree with that, though, regardless.
Yeah, as just an example, when I was younger, we really didn't hear anything about any falconry in Arkansas to speak of, and just assumed it was, there weren't many falconers there, but there were a few, and I think they actually had some Cooper's hawks over there that nested in some of the planted pine forests that the Weyerhaeuser planted. But I didn't really hear much about their falconry. And then at one point, somebody mentioned about these guys trapping these peregrines. And my first thought was, in Arkansas, I mean, what the heck are you doing with a longwing in Arkansas? But that was just my ignorance. Those guys have some incredible snipe hawking. They fly longwings over there in big rice fields, and they practice some of the highest quality falconry in the country over there. And before I heard about them doing it, I absolutely had no idea that they had that kind of that opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, you either find ways to make what you like happen, or you don't. I mean, it's and there's different things that you can do in different areas that sometimes you would have thought wouldn't work, and I don't know, some people find ways to make it happen. I mean, that's one thing I've noticed with falconers and falconry in general is, if someone says it can't happen until someone makes it happen, and then everybody wants to know how they made it happen.
And that's like kestrels and car hawking. I mean, I've had a couple of them when my son was younger. I mean, honestly, just from pure entertainment value, it was not only the one I had, but several other falconers that really hadn't even flown birds in a while got kestrels, and I mean, we had a whole lot of fun car hawking kestrels. I mean, I know some people think that's not, I don't know. Some people look down on some of that, but just for pure entertainment value, we had a whole lot of fun doing that.
Oh, you're talking to one that loves it too. Yeah, I mean, I've really enjoyed my time with kestrels in that way, and yeah, I mean, I don't. Yeah, it's one of those kind of deals that's, like you said, can be taboo with some people, but when it comes down to it, as long as you're, it is what it is. Different strokes, different folks.
Well,
everything
the fights
else
can be fun, and you can make them a little more difficult if you want. And you're obviously no restrictions on the game. The season is year round, and the bag limit's unlimited. And the little birds get into it, and I mean, it's just neat to see a little kestrel doing what it does. And the interesting thing is, for all in the 70s and even the 80s, really, I didn't hear anybody that was really doing much with a kestrel. But some guys started that, and now in England, they love the American kestrels. I mean, it's like a big deal for them to fly those birds. So sometimes you don't appreciate what you have, but when it's really hard to get, you appreciate it. And that's too bad, but it's the way it is for some folks.
Well, that's the way red tails would be. If it was harder to obtain red tails and stuff, everybody would want to fly them all the time. I mean, people already do, but like I said, there's certain species like red-tailed hawks that just get taken for granted because they're so easy to get. Same kind of deal. I mean, you always kind of lust after and want what you can't really have as easily. So
yeah, and even at that, there's some of these birds. I mean, I don't know. I have a friend here, Daniel Murray. He flew at least one red-shouldered hawk. Caught all sorts of stuff with that thing. And I mean, none of us ever really considered flying a red shoulder, but Daniel did. And, I mean, I saw a few thermal flights or, soaring flights with some passage red tails I had, but it was kind of random. And then you take somebody like Connor Bucalo out in California, and I mean, that guy slope soars those red tails. Just, you've probably seen some of his videos. Connor had some absolutely top flight, great falconry with red tails, and he makes the most out of it.
Yeah, I mean, everybody finds their niches and what they like and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's just, yeah. I mean, you never really know, but there's just one thing is a very common denominator though, in that everybody is initially quick to kind of sort of poo-poo on other people's ideas sometimes until they experience it for themselves, and then all of a sudden it not only becomes like the okay, but like this next great thing sometimes. And I guess that's just the way the world turns. So
pushing the envelope's not a bad idea.
No. I mean, I've a lot of aspects of falconry is just like anything else, with same thing with like sports and, like the NFL, they call it a copycat league. I guess, what we do and stuff really isn't all that different either. I mean, everybody's like, everybody just kind of wants to do the next best thing, and and can't be done until somebody does it. And then, like I said, everybody wants to know how to do it.
Exactly.
There. So, yeah. But well, let's get back a little bit to some of the origins or some of the early days of the club and kind of the evolution of, because whenever we initially talked about, different topics and stuff. I mean, you had mentioned that you had a lot of insight into, some of the earlier days and the evolution of how things have worked, in Oklahoma and stuff. And I guess let's pick back up with that train of thought then and kind of, take us through some of the early transitions and kind of the evolution of the role of the club and, and stuff with the role that's played in the, different things as time's gone on with falconry in Oklahoma, and just elaborate on that
Sure.
a little bit more, I guess.
And one thing I don't want to miss anybody here. Prior to kind of starting up the club in '73 or so, maybe it was '74, it was '73. I know that Ken Riddle had practiced falconry here. And there were some other falconers here, but like Charlie Brewer. I don't know. There were some other falconers. There was one falconer named Fred Kassler, who's he wrote some articles in the American Falconry journals. We had the American Falconry Club, and he lived in downtown Tulsa, pretty close to where I'm sitting right here. Of course, it was much different in the '50s. But I know Ken mentioned that they had kind of a club, but that was kind of before me, and at that point that I became active in Oklahoma. In fact, Ken really wasn't living in Oklahoma anymore. He was, I think, down at Austin, doing some kind of work at the university there. So again, from my experience, my firsthand experience is when Woody kind of got things started, and then unfortunately, after we were active in getting our regulations, we weren't real active in meets necessarily, but because the primary focus for us at that moment was just getting better regulations. And then Woody, an interesting story, just because Woody married an Irish woman and brought her, Sandy, imagine that. And she had an absolute phobia of tornadoes. When the weather was looking sketchy, she was literally about to have a nervous breakdown. So Woody moved to Idaho, and the club just kind of floundered. Really nothing happened. And then falconer from Bartlesville named Steve Little, who had started older as a falconer. Um, he had contacted me, and so I sponsored Steve. Um, Steve's biggest contribution early on was that he was an amazing engineer, and he made incredibly high quality stainless steel ring perches, bow perches, block spikes. He made amazing bow nets, and he made the best bells I've ever seen. You may have heard of those as Snell bells, because at some point when Steve got out of falconry, he sold his bell making equipment to a guy named, his last name was Snell, Bill Snell. And Bill Snell made those same bells for another 5 or 6, 10 years or so. But Steve was flying some birds, and he was real interested in kind of getting the club fired up. So we'd had a couple of little kind of informal meets where just some falconers from Oak City came over to Tulsa, and we flew falcons on ducks a couple times. But anyway, we just put the word out to falconers that we were going to have a meeting of the Oklahoma Falconry Club. So we had that in Tulsa. We elected some new officers. We elected Steve Little, our president, and we kind of started the ball rolling again. And then not too long after that, Steve Sherrod, who was an Oklahoma Falconer, went to OU. He was another young falconer that flew falcons with Brewer and Riddle and those guys, mostly before I became a falconer, mostly before 73, because Steve had gone off to Cornell. So I had not met him, but he ended up moving back here. And I think it was either late 82 or early part of 83. So Steve was going to breed birds here, and he brought some breeders that he had from Cornell with him when he moved back. And there were some. Now we were, for the first time in some time, we had some new regulatory issues we needed to address. One of them was we wanted to be able to trap passenger falcons if they came through. There weren't many, but there are some that do winter here sometime or show up. And we needed to get Oklahoma to authorize the sale of captive bred raptors. So that was that, and we got let it lay laws. And again, we still had a great relationship with the ODWC, and that went quite smoothly. And really, over the next few years, we just have we'd have our elections, and we had numerous folks that stepped up and served as our president or served as officers. We would have some fall or winter club meets, and we almost always had a summer picnic, and that's when we would elect officers. And we generally alternate that between the Oklahoma City area and the Tulsa area. We were younger then. We had some really good volleyball games. It was usually the Screamers versus the Mantlers. I think the Tulsa guys won most of the time. But anyway, not necessarily. But yeah, we had a great time. We had a good club. We've always had a good club. Over the years, we've had people pass away, like Steve Sherrod last year, Oscar Pack a 3 years ago. My good friend Kevin Leggett, he died about 25 years ago, 23. We lose some folks, but we got new falconers that are coming in, and it's a little different. It's a little different landscape now, in that we don't have a prairie chicken season anymore, because they've dwindled, and the lessers that are out in western Oklahoma they don't allow you to hawk those either. But they shut down our greater season. We don't have hardly any quail. We don't have all the same industrial parks. So, a lot of permission is just not as easy to get for folks. And even beyond that, I just think that the private land, the stewards of private land have a little different attitude about that now than they did in the 70s or even the 80s. Got a lot of the folks that were happy to give me permission or passed away, and their family, their kids on it now. And so much land is leased, and it's just more difficult for falconers now that are coming up in Oklahoma to practice the same kind of falconry that we did. So they have to be adaptive. There's other things they can do, but it's you can see the difference.
Well, I'm sure it's everywhere now. Unfortunately, it's just it's unfortunately just seems to be the same theme, and it doesn't really matter if it's our country or anywhere else. I mean, it's the same problem. More people coming in now, less land to hunt, and I mean it's a recurring theme. More and more as time just keeps going on. Unfortunately, kind of sucks.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of common saying things aren't going the way we want for falconry for the most part. I mean, on the one hand, the irony is that we have access to amazing birds now. I mean, there's still plenty of wild raptors to take, and we've got some great selections for captive bred birds. So getting the birds not the difficult part. Again, in the 80s, 70s, getting a longwing was a little more difficult, other than prairie falcons, because that's pretty much all that we had access to until captive breeding. But we had a lot of game. And now the game's the issue, not access to birds. But sometimes you just have to work a little harder at it.
Yep. Yeah. People that want to make it happen usually find a way. It's yeah. I mean, it's as they say, and as we said many times before, where there's a will, there's a way, and yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't really have an answer. I mean, it's a topic that I've discussed with lots of people on the podcast as to what can be done, but unfortunately, there's not, in a lot of instances, a lot of things that can really be done, to kind of mitigate what we're losing. In a lot of ways, it's really unfortunate. Yeah,
I mean, ducks have been ducks are kind of a staple for most of us that are flying big falcons because, they're migratory. So it's not like, it's not like flying open game birds or something. I mean, if you have good production up north, then there's a decent chance we're going to have plenty of opportunities down here. But even that stuff changes. I mean, there's a lot of different factors that affect what kind of waterfowl season we're going to have here in Oklahoma. I mean, some of the places I used to fly a lot of ducks, I mean, the ag practices were very different. I mean, southeast of Oklahoma, southeast of Tulsa, I used to hunt down in an area called Boynton, and the ag down there was milo, soybeans, and peanuts, and waterfowl, wintering waterfowl. I mean, there's some big giant lakes in that area, and I can remember going down there flying birds and just duck hunting with shotguns and just seeing huge tornado clouds of 10, 20,000 mallards, descending on these peanut fields. And, I mean, there were ducks on every single pond. And we just don't see anything like that now. I mean, the ag practices aren't the same down there. And then, certain ag practices to the north of us are holding those same mallards. They don't ever come down here now. So, and again, we used to have a whole, I mean, just ranching practices. I mean, ranchers put a whole lot of cattle on in their pastures, and they the ponds are usually mud banked now, whereas in the 70s and 80s, most of the ponds that I flew, the edges of the ponds up in the necks were full of smartweed and coontail moss and some other vegetation, like gadwalls, for example. They really liked that. I mean, when you found ponds like that, you knew you were going to find ducks on them. There just aren't that many ponds like that anymore here. So don't mean to be all doom and gloom. We still enjoy falconry and we still find ducks to fly, but it's more difficult than it was significantly.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to be doom and gloom, but yeah, I mean, like we said earlier, though, I mean, if you really want to if you really want to make it work somehow, you'll adapt and overcome. It's just a matter of putting in the work, the leg work, and get out of it what you put into it, just like anything else. But yeah, well, I mean, and one thing I do like asking people occasionally that's been in this for as long as you have, like a lot of the older generation guys that were in it from the, you know, been in it for several decades. I like to ask, I mean, is there anything in particular that you wish that you could have done, but hadn't ever gotten to? Is there any other different kind of species or style of falconry that you wish that you could have done and haven't?
That's an interesting question because I consider myself pretty fortunate. Um, I've been able to fly ducks for decades. I've flown grouse for decades. I've flown passage merlins. I flew an IS Jack Merlin um, that I tame hacked for the whole year, all the time. He lived in my training field, and I'd go out. He'd see my car and come flying off the rooftops from a nearby neighborhood. He lived out there. Um, I caught a lot of small birds with him from waiting on. Um, the only thing that I've not, I mean, I've been able to fly ducks, I've been able to fly grouse, I've flown rabbits. I've not really flown squirrels, but I watched some guys fly them, and that's fun hawking. Um, but I've flown small birds. I've flown, like I said, ducks and grouse, pheasants, sage grouse, sharp tails. Not a lot of huns, but they're just not close to us. But the one thing I'd say that I haven't done, and I really haven't had the opportunity. I mean, I probably caught a dozen snipe in my life, but I've never been able to fly a tiercel, a smaller falcon like a tiercel peregrine or prairie, consistently on snipe, and that would be something I would really enjoy, but it's probably never going to happen because we just don't have the habitat here near me to regularly do that, like those guys in Arkansas do, for example. But other than that, really, I mean, I haven't flown a little Acipter really, and amazingly, I never flew a Cooper's hawk. I did fly a couple of tiercel goshawks on Bob White's, and and that was fun, and not much different than flying a Cooper's hawk. But growing up, just again, the Cooper's hawk was the holy grail for us in our mind because of all the quail we had, and I ended up, by the time I could get them, I was already flying big falcons, and we really didn't have the quail the same way. So, yeah, I mean, I feel very fortunate to have been able to try a lot of different things and enjoy it. So not a whole lot of regrets in that.
Doesn't sound like it. Sounds like you've had a pretty envious falconry career. I mean, it's and that's the big reason why I like asking that to guys with as many years of experience as yourself have, because it's funny. You mentioned not really doing much squirrel hawking and all that. Like, it's interesting to me to find out the things that other people get to do that's kind of like a mainstay and kind of, once again, sort of like a taken for granted, type of deal, and listening to, like a comparatively speaking, listening to other guys like that are from out west and stuff. I mean, there were some people that I've talked to before that actually had never flown a red tail, and it's just that kind of stuff I think is kind of neat to hear the differences in people's experiences that way, because what one person is able to do regularly because it's all they really have is something that someone else might never get to do. So it kind of teaches you to not necessarily take certain things, once again, going back to the whole taking for granted thing. I mean, it's you sometimes you don't think about that a whole lot, like what you get to do is something that someone else might never get to do. So
yeah, and I mean, I don't know, people talk about their evolution of their falconry. I mean, it doesn't have to go any particular direction. And again, just from a memory standpoint, I mean, I can remember being in 1972, and we trapped this passage redtail, and it was starving. It was just an average size male, 32 ounce, 33 ounce passage male redtail, but it was starving. And I took it home, and I could feel its keel. It was lean. And I mean, when we tunked that pigeon out, it didn't even hit the ground, and that redtail was off this big pole. And I remember I just tossed it a bird to eat on the bro perch first day. But that bird trained really quickly. And at that point, the guys I knew in Tulsa that I'd met had only flown some IS redtails, and no one had really flown a passenger redtail. And I took it out. I just walked up the street at like 10 days, and I had it on a fishing reel just to see. And I kicked up a rabbit, and that thing took off like a goshawk. And it was in tumbleweeds, and the rabbit dodged, and the redtail shot straight up about 15, 20 feet and just rolled over and hammered in the ground and didn't get it. But I got about 4 or 5 flights, and I was absolutely in awe of what I was watching, because it flew very differently than the other redtails I'd seen fly. And I remember just going home with this big grin on my face, like, I got to get on the phone and call my buddies, and tell them about this. And I took it off the line in a couple more days, and I remember having, and this is after school. I could get out of ninth grade, run home to school, half a mile walk, grab that bird and head out. And I think I probably had the second or third time out, I think it probably had 20 flights, and every flight was a near miss. And then it nailed one. And I don't think I've ever been more excited in my life than when that redtail caught that rabbit that way. It was a vivid memory. And that just really doesn't get topped for me. I've had other really great memories. I had, accomplishment. I've had birds catch things I didn't think I might catch, and I've got flights etched in my memory, lots of them. And I kept a diary for everything I flew for probably 25 or 30 years. But like I said, that first passage redtail was the first time falconry really hit me. We'd gone out and catch rats. We'd pull carpets out of fields that had a bunch of cotton rats under them, and these birds would dive off and just grab them. And we got Super 8 movies of that kind of stuff. It was fun. It was fun, but we knew it wasn't what we could do, but we just hadn't done it yet. But like I said, catching rabbits with the very first passage redtail I had was one of the most satisfying things I ever had in falconry.
Nice. Well, you beat me to the punch, on asking what one of your favorite, more memorable experiences was and stuff. That's cool. I like, once again, it's always cool, finding out what people, different people value different things, and, different things get etched in people's brains for different reasons and things like that. People are impressionable in different ways. So that's cool that I can understand why that experience would have been like that for you, though, because y'all still hadn't quite found that potential yet with that particular type of bird that's ironically kind of become the meat and potatoes of falconry, in our country. So I can totally see that. But bridging off of that a little bit, though, what's been they say, and this is another question that I like asking guys with a ton of experiences, is they say that every falconer always has one super elite or special bird or whatever. What in your mind has been like the best bird that you've ever flown in your career so far? Putting you on the spot again. Sorry.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of male deer peregrines. But the first one I had, I got from Pete Widener, and it was an imprint. It was a Tiercel deer peregrine named Taz. And I'd already flown a female hybrid for 3 seasons, and I really had kind of grouse hawking figured out. And I had a couple of good friends. One was a guy that you probably know, Tim Jessel. Tim was my apprentice, and he was just starting to fly some long wings um, when I got Taz, and Rob Summers was here. He moved here from over by El Reno, and we hacked a bunch of birds on a big hill. We call it the Hack Hill. It's about 6-8 miles from my house now where I live. It was just a big south-facing slope, the hill, and no matter how hot it was in the summer, when you got on the top of that hill, there was a breeze, and since the breeze prevailing wind in Oklahoma and is out of the south, so all these young birds, we take them out there before they even hard bend and let them look around and hop around, and they take those short flights, and then after a while, it was tame hack chaos. And they developed a lot. I mean, they chased each other. They chased little birds, butterflies, and damn near everyone I ever had on that hill at one point went down and grabbed a little black wasp, got stung, came back holding its foot up, and it took a day before that swelling went down. They learned that lesson. But I've hacked a bunch of birds on that hill. But Taz, that hack season was fun, and at that point I knew where there were a lot of grouse, and I flew Taz for 8 years, and he caught an awful lot of grouse, and he was a consistent performer, and he's the best grouse hawk I've ever had. And his 8th season, I was up in Kansas flying with a good friend, and it was right before Christmas. I was going to be up there about 3 or 4 days, and we flew him on a perfect evening. It was about 20 degrees and just a little light breeze, and like clockwork, 20 grouse went into this milo field. And so put him up, and off he went. Came over about 700, 800 feet, walked right in, and he came down and just drilled the grouse, and whipped around and hit the ground and garvin on the ground, and the grouse could barely fly, but it started to take off, and Taz took off after him, and I was like, yeah, that's dead. And then all of a sudden, my bird just glided to the ground, and he was dead right there. Just hit the grouse wrong, and that was it. But I had great seasons with him. And if I had to pick one, just because he was that good a bird, I mean, I've had some other really good deer peregrines, but I've never had one catch as many grouse as him, or really quite as consistently. I mean, he was very good.
Yeah, and you can always, whenever I ask people that occasionally too, you can always tell that it really, that particular bird always really meant something to that person too, because I mean, I can just, being able to watch your facial expressions and see you kind of get a little emotional, thinking back a little bit, it's amazing how some of these birds, just, I don't know, how much of an impression they make on us. And it always is kind of one of those things that I think we'll always wonder just how much of an impression we truly make on them. I mean, I know that it's probably never going to be as much as they make on us, but it would be interesting to kind of be able to get into some of these birds' heads occasionally and see. Yeah. If they affect us so profoundly, but yeah, no, I mean, I could tell that, like I said, you're like a lot of other people that I've talked to, you can kind of, like I said, it's really easy to tell the emotional change and stuff and how much some of these birds mean to us and everything. I can tell it definitely meant a lot to you.
Well, so. and he was, I really haven't flown imprints for the last, I think the last imprint I had was in 2011. That was another deer peregrine tiercel, and he cracked a sharp tail and broke his leg, and had to get it, took him straight to Rettig and got it, everything pinned and surgeryed up, but it didn't work, and the leg just died. And it was an imprint, and after that was a little bastard, and he was a Kenny Sterner hybrid that I flew for almost 10 years, and I just don't think I want to fly imprints anymore, because they do, when you raise a little imprint, it's like raising your kid. And like with Taz, I mean, I got him right when I got married, right when I got out of law school. right when my first son was born, and just through so many different, life events, and he was this really consistent bird. I mean, I knew when I went out with Taz, I was going to have a good time. It was going to be a good flight, and that just some of the things that happen, other things that happen in your life, they're associated with certain birds, are part of that. So, yeah, he was a special one for me, definitely.
No, that's interesting that you say that too, because I think that we don't always make those associations, or they're not always as super obvious to us until after that particular bird or those particular things are gone, and then we think back and we think, man, that it's ironic sometimes how the timing of all that works.
Yeah,
sure.
we use birds that we have references to remember lots of things. Like, oh, last one I had so and so, and kind of like music almost. You certain times you think back about a certain time, and I remember the first falcon I had, a passage bird. It was a pretty wonderful experience. She was a great bird, and the first big longwing I had that I really caught a lot of game with. And anytime I think about that bird, I think of a Tommy Two-Tone song, 8675309 Jenny. Because I'd be driving down to go hawking, and that song would be on the radio. And so when I think about when that song came out, I know because it was the first season that I had that passage year. So, yeah.
That's funny how that works. It really is. That's yeah, I don't know. Like and I didn't even think about that honestly until you just mentioned that. I mean, there's definitely some different things that I can think of now. Yeah, it's kind of similar, but yeah, no, I mean, I appreciate you sharing all that stuff, and yeah, I before we end this though, I do the one last question I want to ask you is the same that I usually like to end on, and that is, do you have a piece of advice that you'd like to pass on to, current and prospective, future generations of falconers, and then we can, go ahead and wrap this up and let you get on to the rest of your day.
Well, you have to think about that a sec, but I guess what I'd say is sort of something we discussed before. On the one hand, there's a lot of information out there. I mean, that is one difference. I mean, again, when I started falconry, it was, when I first got interested in falconry, it was World Book and Encyclopedia Britannica, and Humphrey Evans' Falconry for You, and a few other books later that I found out about, like Webster and Beebe's book. The internet is a pretty amazing in that regard. Things like this podcast and all the videos you can see, and there's a lot of good falconers that have blogs or websites, and you can learn a lot from your computer. But from a falconry standpoint, I think it's just more of the advice to younger falconers, for example, it's whatever you get, make sure you can hawk it. Make sure you've got something you can fly with it. Because I've never been a bird keeper. I mean, as neat as these falcons are, I don't have it to sit around and look at it. I mean, I respect the falconers that hawk their birds. If you're not going to be able to hunt your bird, then you probably have more fun with a African gray parrot, or something else. Because I mean, we attribute our traits to birds. Is your bird happy? Oh yeah, he got a big crop. He was really happy. See the way he roused. Oh, he's sticking his beak on my fist. Yeah, he's all happy. And I don't know what truth there is to any of that, but I do know that I want my bird to feel like it's out doing what they're designed to do, not sitting around.
Cool. Perfect. Well, I mean, like I said, thank you again so much for going ahead and making the time to do this again. And once again, I hate that we're not going to be able to actually meet in person and stuff, but I don't know, who knows? Yeah, I mean, who knows? We'll see. I mean, I don't know if you're planning on going to the NAFA meet, but maybe we'll get to meet there.
I'm 2 hours from my house, so yeah, I'll probably go to that one.
We'll see what happens. But worst case scenario, if there's anything that we can think of between now and that time that we didn't cover during this, maybe we can do another one then, and actually get a chance to maybe hang out and just tell lies for a while.
Okay. Well, we'll yeah. I mean, I got a name, a face, and a number here, so we'll be in touch, I'm sure.
Sounds good. Well, thanks again, Mark. Appreciate you. Go ahead and stick around for a minute. And thanks again. And is there anything else that you want to discuss real quick though? Before, on that note, is there anything else, or have we covered some of the history and all that kind of stuff as much as you think we should have? Or
well, there are a lot of falconers. I mean, when somebody does something like this, they never end up mentioning everybody they know. Sometimes they just don't. Unless you have a list of people. And I didn't write anything down. But, there are a lot of falconers over the years that I've enjoyed meeting and I've enjoyed flying birds with. I think American falconry is pretty amazing, really. We've had the benefit over the years of captive birds, of ample wild populations, and quarry and places to fly, unlike a lot of our fellow falconers from Europe that struggle with more of that. The guys in England that can afford mowers to fly grouse on and stuff, that's one thing, but that's not, the average falconer can't do that. But like I said, I don't mean to leave anybody out when I'm on this. I think you'll probably get some other names, and from some of the other Oklahoma falconers you're going to talk to. But, when I think about the young guys in Tulsa that I grew up with, one of those is a guy named Robert McAllister. And Robert didn't stay a falconer forever because he liked to hunt and fish and do everything. But he was a very good friend, and he had a couple of red tails, and he went out and he caught a bunch of rabbits with them. He just got killed in an airplane crash 3 months ago. They're just, like I said, I hope I certainly don't want to miss anybody. But there were a lot of good young falconers that were, it was a magic time in the 70s. We had a great time. Like I said, I didn't mean to leave anybody out.
Well, the unfortunate reality is that the longer we live and the more that we do certain things, the more people we meet, and the unfortunate reality is that sometimes there's just always going to be people that doesn't mean that we don't think about them or value our time with them and stuff. But if you live a full and rich life, eventually you're going to meet a bunch of people, and you're not on the spur of the moment, even if you have time to plan, unfortunately, you're not going to remember everything. Yeah. So table the thought, and we'll save it for next time. And until then, like I said, thank you again. And we'll go ahead and end this on that note. And hopefully I'll see you in November.
Thank you, John.